Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Brand Life podcast. If you're a brand and you're thinking about your proposition or your positioning or your brand messaging or your look and feel, but you either don't know where to start or you want to learn more about the brand development process, then I'm here to share all of my top tips from more than 10 years specializing in brand strategy. For my very first podcast, I wanted to start at the beginning of the brand strategy process, which is the brand discovery phase. And I shouldn't say it out loud, but that is my favorite part of any brand project. This is our opportunity to get deep into all of the insights around the market, your competition, your customers, what makes you different as a company, and feeding all of that into where your brand goes in the future. But before that, a quick introduction to me. I'm Louise Goodthorpe. I'm Head of Creative and Brand here at StrategiQ. So I've been working in agencies for the last decade, specialising in brand strategy. So most of my day-to-day, my background, my passion is in bringing brand stories to life. So let's start by talking about what is the discovery phase. So there's two ways that you can think about this. One, it's when you meet somebody for the first time and then you're in that dating phase. You want to know everything about them. You want to know who they are. You want to know everything about their background and how they got to who they are today. But also you want to know about their ambitions and their aspirations and what their goals are for the future. But also in that, it's really useful to get the perspective of other people. So ask your friends, what do they think about it? Ask others and get their perspective. What is their reputation? And actually the difference between maybe what the brand thinks they are and what the external world thinks they are. Sometimes there's gaps in between that. The other way to think about it as well is, I like to think of it like I'm a lawyer pulling together my case, and what you're doing is pulling together all of the evidence. You're looking at the market context, you're looking at everybody involved, and you're bringing all of that together to draw really definitive conclusions based on evidence. You know, this isn't about subjectivity. This is about the objectivity of the market, everything that's going on in your space, everything that's true about you and your business and your brand, and how all of that can feed into the conclusions that we draw and how we move forward with your brand. And discovery isn't a nice to have. It isn't a warm-up act. It is everything that feeds into where your brand goes in the future, making sure that it is a genuine proposition, that it's a really meaningful and valid positioning for your brand. And also it feeds into you having a really credible visual identity as well. I'll now give you an overview of the key activities that go into that brand discovery phase. So you've got 5 key areas, and I'll touch on these and then we'll go into each of them in a bit more detail. So number 1, you've got your brand workshop. This is about getting all of the key stakeholders, ideally in the same room. Sometimes it does have to be virtual or hybrid, but ideally getting everybody in the same room and spending half a day, a full day dedicated to just going through that brand top to bottom. Next up is your stakeholder interviews. So this can be internal, external, getting everybody from the most senior to the most junior, but also externally, current customers, lapsed customers, also super important to get their insights as well. And rounding off all of that first-hand perspective that feeds into the discovery phase. Then next up, you've got the 4 C's. So this is hands-on research, looking at the company itself, your consumers, looking at competitors, and looking at the cultural landscape as well. Then 4 and 5, I'll cover these off together, but you've got your brand audit. This is looking at how your brand is showing up in the world, how it is manifesting across all the different channels. Is it consistent? Is it coherent? Is it resonating with the right audiences? And the last one, which is becoming increasingly important, is looking at how your brand is showing up for basically machines. So AI, LLMs, how is your brand showing up in those platforms? And that one is going to become increasingly important, and it will inform not only your brand strategy, but how your brand strategy is rolled out as well. So now we've got those 5 key activities. Let's go into each of them in a bit more detail. So the first activity that I'm going to dive into is the brand workshop. And really important to note that this is a workshop. It's not just a meeting. It's not designed to be transactional. It is designed to be absolutely transformational. And the other key word here is that it should feel cathartic. The client should leave the session feeling like they have downloaded their brain to you, that they have offloaded the weight of their brand challenge to you, because that is now yours. You carry the weight of that challenge now, and it's yours to solve. And the other thing to note with brand workshops is that they should absolutely be designed around the client. These are not one-size-fits-all sessions that can just be churned out again and again. And I can give you a few examples from the last few years about the types and the variety of brand workshops and how to get the best outcomes from them. So one of them, for example, was an accountancy firm. I was working with multiple stakeholders in the same room. And in these sessions, it's really important that you're not just the facilitator, but you're actually leading the session and you're reading the session as well. So in this one in particular, there were multiple people from all different parts of the business, all different levels of seniority, and also different types of personalities as well. And these sessions are designed for everybody to be able to open up and share their perspectives and to share their thoughts and opinions. And so guiding that through the day is super important, which is also why it's really important to have a framework for you going into that session. So I go into those knowing exactly what I want to get out of it, having my key questions, but making sure that it's a really organic session. It's not a structured interview process. It's making sure that you guide the session, and at the end of it, you get those key outcomes that tick everything off that list, but without ever realizing that there was a framework in place. The next example that I would give is total opposite to that. This was where I went out to the location of the client, spent the day at the factory with the founder. We sat down, we had coffee, we exchanged stories. I heard all about how the business was, an initial idea into how it was founded, into how it became operational, into how it grew, and then what it wanted to be in the future. And that was my goal to then take on. That was my challenge of how I took that brand from where it was today to where it wanted to be. And the beauty of that brand workshop was it wasn't us all sat around a table. It was me getting to meet the team, to meet the company dog, to actually see the craft and the stitching of how everything was made and pulled together, and the care and the attention. And the other thing with that is when I was sat having coffee with the founder, it's those small anecdotal stories that you can just pick up the kernel of something that is a passing comment from an almost faded memory that actually then becomes something that just drives forward the brand, that manifests as a brand personality and character and the messaging and the tone of voice down to individual words that were just mentioned that one day many years ago, but now manifests as something that takes the brand forward and resonates and engages with people today, but also in the years to come as well. And the third example is a brand workshop that was kind of the middle ground. It was a smaller working group, but also it was a much more physical and interactive session, which was totally right for the client who was more experiential. And with that, what we were able to do was have massive printouts, pen and paper, sticky notes, and we were able to facilitate a session where everybody could just not only articulate their immediate thoughts, but could jot them down on paper. And it just took off the pressure of having that Q&A type scenario. And from there, I could collate the sticky notes at the end and form them together like a little patchwork to reflect on and pull together all of the key insights from that session. So that's just 3 examples from many types of brand workshop. But the important point is that it is not one size fits all, and it is about tailoring the experience to the client and making sure that you get the most out of that session. Speaking about important conversations, let's move on to the stakeholder interviews. Now, these are a series of one-on-one conversations with key people from either inside the business or outside of it. So if we're talking to internal stakeholders, this could be the CEO, it could be the founder, it could be a new recruit. If we're speaking to people outside of the business, it can be current customers, but also really important. I love to speak to lapsed customers to find out what went wrong, what were their frustrations, what were their challenges. And that really helps inform where we go with the brand strategy as well. Now, these interviews are very informal, they're very organic, but most importantly, they're an opportunity for people to be heard. And the most important thing with these conversations is setting up your contributor in the right way so that they feel safe, they feel secure, and they know that none of their contributions are going to be presented back to their CEO with their name against it. And that's really important because we want their unguarded insights about what it is to live and breathe and work inside of that brand. What is the day-to-day life like? What is the behavior? What is the principles? What is the personality? What are the honest and open challenges about how the business operates, but also how the brand manifests as well? And that's so important because how the business operates must ultimately ladder up to how the brand manifests in the world. We can't be making promises about what the brand is or what the brand does or what the brand offers you, and then from an operational point of view, it's falling short of that or is just a million miles from the mark. So having those two worlds come together is so important, and to extract that from the brand discovery process is one of the most important things to achieve. So now we've done our brand workshop, we've completed all of our one-on-one interviews, we've gathered all of our first-hand insights, and we've got the transcripts from all of those conversations. As long as the people are comfortable with it being recorded, guys, don't forget to ask. And now we can move on to wider exploration and how we validate those perspectives against what's happening in the real world. The next part of the discovery phase is the 4 C's. Now, this bit is led by our creative strategists, and it's looking at the key areas of company, consumer, competitor, and culture. And this is focusing on looking at desktop research, it's looking at AI insights, it's looking at market data, it's looking at social listening, it's looking at all those different inputs and how they help us land on key insights in each of those 4 areas. And the really critical thing about having the 4 C's is that it helps me to validate what I'm hearing from the first-hand perspectives of the business to actually what is valid and verifiable in the market, not only today, but in terms of where the market is going as well. From a consumer perspective, this isn't just about looking at demographics. This is about looking at Reddit and social listening and forums and hearing firsthand what the frustrations, what the needs, what the challenges are, and how that informs how we are responding and adapting to those needs. From a market and a competitor point of view, yes, this is looking at the spaces that competitors are filling up and finding the gaps. But actually, the real crucial thing is that we are not just finding a gap and positioning a brand into it for the sake of it. It's never going to work. This has got to be built around what is true and genuine and ownable about your brand, nobody else's. If it fits into a gap, brilliant. But if not, we're not going to be forcing any brand into a gap that is out there. Then there are 2 more components to the brand discovery process. You've got your brand audit and you've got your LLM analysis. So from a brand audit point of view, this is about analysing how your brand is showing up in the world, looking at the different channels that it is appearing on. Is it consistent? Is it coherent? Is it compelling? If it's not, then that's often a symptom of brand strategy, either in terms of the strategy itself or how it's being rolled out. And that's a problem that we can address and we can look at and we can solve. Then you've got your LLM analysis. This is becoming more and more important because you're not just creating a brand for people anymore. You need your brand to be resonant and showing up on machines as well. So that can also help inform and adapt the brand strategy, but more so the execution and the rollout of it in terms of the content and how that content is coming to life. That is all of the key information gathering activities within the discovery phase. So now you're left with an abundance of information, of data, of insights and perspectives. And it's all about now the analysis and what you do with that information. So this is the bit where I love to just shut myself away and bring all of that data together and work through it and analyze it. So this is about pulling out key themes where there's consistency, where there's overlap, where there's validation, but really importantly, about unpicking and unlocking where there is contradictions. And you will find this even through the interviews where you'll have people that touch on different topics, but their perspective could be completely different. Or there could be total overlap in terms of some of the questions I ask might be around what's the magic of your brand? And you generally get similar insights and perspectives come out, but also you might get a totally left field comment that nobody has actually uncovered or grown or developed yet. And I've seen this a few times, and actually that little bit of gold from over here just ends up transpiring to something massive and beautiful over here in the brand. But that just came out of one conversation on one day. So now all of your key activities from an information gathering point of view are completed. I've got all of the key outputs from the brand workshop, the transcript from the stakeholder interviews. We've looked at the brand audit and analysis. We've looked at the LLM situation, and we've also got the 4 Cs as well. So now it's about what does any of that actually mean, and what do we do with it? So now we are looking at all of the different patterns. We're looking at the consistency in thinking. We're looking at the contradictions in thinking and opinions, and pulling out all of those insights. And what's really important here is that we start to land buckets of information around what is the brand, what does it stand for, where is the opportunity. We can pull together a SWOT analysis on the brand as well. We can start to look at the personality and character. We can start to look at what are the differentiators that will ultimately ladder up to the core proposition that will be developed in the next phase. But all of these pieces of information have to be stitched together with all of the different threads from all of the different conversations and all of the different inputs from that information discovery phase. The craft ultimately then is how all of that comes together into one consistent discovery playback document. And the discovery playback session is the most important part of this whole phase. Now, there's always a lot of anticipation around the discovery playback session. And in all honesty, it can make or break a project. It's so important that at the start of that session, you set up what the brief was, what you set out to achieve, and what has happened in that last 4 weeks to get us to where we are today. But then, and this is the most important part, is it's not just about playing back what you've heard. It's about playing back what you found and what it means. And that means laddering up with your observations, your experiences, but also all of the evidence that has fed into your conclusions and your recommendations. And here's the key thing. You have to tell the client the uncomfortable truths. What is the disconnect between the current brand promise and how they're performing operationally? What is the disconnect between what's happening in the market and how that brand is showing up? And I've got a very tangible example of this from a brand project from a few years ago, where it was a very established brand, a very well-regarded brand, great people. And we went through the discovery phase. I had a number of conversations with the internal teams and also with external customers, but also, as I mentioned earlier, the lapsed customers. Those external conversations were really illuminating in terms of the core proposition was just, 1, not being lived up to, but actually 2, it would have been table stakes in that industry. So from that, what we had to do with the discovery phase is pull together all of the themes, all of the evidence, the SWOT analysis, the personas, what they needed, what the brand wasn't living up to, and provide all of those really core recommendations for what the brand needed to leave behind, but actually what it needed to move towards. And we created a whole new proposition in the next phase. And actually we kept that old proposition as a key pillar, which laddered up to that crowning glory of the new proposition that was ownable, that was authentic, and that was genuinely them, and that their customers really loved. The thing that I would say most about the brand discovery process, though, is that when you play it back to a client and you've listened and you've observed and you've shared, and it lands in the hearts and minds of those people in the room, that is the most rewarding feeling. And also, I do say this as a joke, but I genuinely mean it because it does happen every time. But I always say, I know that I'm ready to write a brand when I'm dreaming about it. And that is honestly so true. Like 2 weeks into any discovery process, I am living and breathing the brand so much that it just becomes part of my subconscious, and I'm genuinely dreaming about it as much as I'm working on it in the day. And that is when I know that I am living that discovery process. What I always find really interesting is that I look out to the brands that we've touched in the past, and I can literally see how and where the brand discovery process informed how that brand is manifesting today. If you are thinking about evolving your brand strategy, I hope this episode has given you a flavour of what that very first step should look like, but most importantly, what it should feel like. So before you are briefing any creative, before you are starting to put pen to paper on developing your proposition, or before you're even starting to think about what colour your brand is, just ask yourself, have you done all of the important listening first off? Thank you so much for joining me for this first episode of the Brand Life podcast. I'll be back soon and I'll be talking about how we move from the discovery phase into the brand proposition phase. But thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you all soon.